It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.
All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the SDG Podcast. I'm Peter Lawrence, joined today by special guests John Grimm and Julia. I can't do it. Julia, can you say your last name?
It's McCunn.
Julia McCunn. Thank you. And today we're going to talk about knowing your audience and speaking their language.
Amen.
Sound like a good plan?
Go ahead.
All right. When we start talking about knowing your audience and sort of get into this a little bit, like who is our audience for consultants and for you guys especially, because John and Julia, you're both Scrum Masters / Agile experts, or how would you guys introduce yourselves? John, how would you talk about your titles or your skills or whatever?
Yeah, so even though we're played a lot of program management roles, there are more specialized roles like release manager, counselor, psychologist,
Yep.
babysitter, all kinds of things that we
do
get
babysitting.
into, right? I mean, they kind of expect us to do a little bit of everything when coming in because, I think a lot of management thinks of Scrum Masters still as
right.
And project manager is a little bit, and sometimes we have to step into different roles. I know for myself, like I said, I've played a lot of that is either pure Scrum Master or pure project manager or pure program manager or somewhere in between, and then a lot of times we pulled into other stuff too, like BSA and some QA stuff, and then I've even done some development.
No.
Not that.
Keep me away from a keyboard.
Julia, how about you? About the same?
Well, I'm pretty new to consulting. I just joined STG about 4 or 5 months ago. And I spent a lot of years, 20 plus, at the same company for a long time, working various roles. But in the technology space, Scrum Master, Agile Coach, QA Analyst, Business Analyst, and most recently just kind of managing a team of service desk folks. When you talk about kind of knowing your audience, run the gamut from, working with, senior leadership to coaching and managing very green, young, new to the work world folks too. So
yeah, that's super fun. What are some like John, what's an easy way? What are the easy ways to get to know your audience?
I mean, just talking to them, right? Getting to know them as a person, because in our position here in the delivery space, we talk to a lot of different. Talk to the lowest level of the programmer. We'll talk to project coordinators.
Sure.
We'll talk, and then all the way up to. I've been involved with CEOs, who is a totally different breed, but we talk to everybody, and sometimes it's technical folks, sometimes it's non-technical. You just have to kind of get to know who that person is and where they're coming from more than anything. And there's really no, you can go by their title, but
sure,
I don't know that there's any way to short circuit that. I mean, I just try to build relationships, get to know the people, and get to know where their comfort zone is, what they're able to do. Kind of just keep building that relationship.
Cool. Julia, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think, as I mentioned, can be working with folks that are like brand new to the industry or to the work world. I think kind of knowing what is motivating your audience. So if you're dealing with the CEO or CFO, what are they looking for? What's the information they need from you? Obviously, you have to taper both your communication style and the information you're delivering or the questions you're asking, based on who those folks are. Like John said, there's no way to get around the fact that you have to do the work to get to know people and build the relationships. But certainly you can kind of get a hint of where to start based on who you're talking to.
So speaking of that, like where they are both in their career, but also geographically. I know the working remote and a lot of the COVID and whatever else have changed the landscape. And starting even before that, working with international folks kind of changes the landscape a little bit as far as, learning maybe their favorite cricket team or their favorite chess master or something else like that. John, what's your best experience, or what kind of experience do you have sort of working with folks that aren't necessarily in the United States, or are, but are maybe temporarily here?
No, I mean, we have a gamut of things that people that we talk, you can't be afraid of it. They're just people, man. It's like they're just out there doing their best, just like we are. They're coming from a different perspective, right? I mean, but we're all working towards the same goal, to make a project a success, right? Or make an engagement a success. So, I try to get to know people as much as possible. The engagement with the people themselves is sometimes challenging. I mean, they're coming from someplace completely different. They might be intimidated, just as much as you might be intimidated talking to folks, in far-flung lands. But you gotta find that common ground, and if anything, you just base it all in what the common understanding is of what you're trying to accomplish.
Sure.
Right? I mean, they don't pay us just as consultants to just come in and look pretty. In my case, very pretty. But
right.
Yeah, right. But we're there to do a job, and we gotta work with a team to do that. So you base it on what we know, kind of lay that groundwork, and then from there you can keep building those blocks of what kind of car do you do?
Sure.
Where'd you go to college? Who's your favorite cricket team? Or how's the weather today? Any of that stuff.
Yeah, I think finding just that common thing to start the conversation, start the relationship. At a developer that I worked with that was kind of a tough nut to crack, and I tried several different ways to kind of build that bridge and make that relationship, and it just wasn't working. I was just kind of getting this brick wall, but found out that
all business all the time.
So serious, but I found out that he was a skateboarder. I think I was coming into work one day and saw him close his trunk and saw that there was a skateboard in the back of his car. So
nice.
I grew up skateboarding, so I just kind of asked that question. Hey, you have a board in your car? Do you skate? And it was like a light went on. And actually, we ended up getting to be really good friends. Someone I really respect and enjoy as a friend to this day. So
nice.
I think that finding that place that you can connect, and I think it has to do with like gaining trust too. I think he didn't really trust me because he probably assumed we had nothing in common. So I think it's really finding that thing that you can, you are speaking the same language.
That's really interesting, because we probably, if we would have gone back and asked you about that person before you had that commonality, that you'd be like, well, I don't know, I'm going to keep trying, but
yep, exactly.
It sure is hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and people see us, especially in the delivery space, as leadership, right? That leadership title.
Right.
And people have been burned by leaders in the past, so they're a little leery of opening up or allowing any, chink in the armor to give somebody space to use it against them, right? So a lot of people close down to the point where it's business, 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 and you don't talk about anything else, right? So,
sure.
Ground it there. But then, like you said, like you're at lunch someday and they, like you said, you see a skateboard in their car and you're like, oh, what do you do with that? What's going on?
Well, and I think too, showing your own vulnerability helps people open up. Kind of like, I think to your point, like they sometimes see the Scrum Master as maybe not part of the team necessarily. But I think, kind of like showing that you you have your weaknesses too. You have your things you're not as good at, and maybe like even just asking for help on what those things are. Can you explain this? You're working on this back end thing. Can you explain what you're doing? Showing that vulnerability, I think, helps kind of break the ice a little bit.
So we talked about.
Go
ahead, John.
Getting to know somebody, that's a two-way street. So you kind of got to be vulnerable. Put yourself out there a little bit. And when you're going through like, an agile scrum, sometimes it's scraggle.
You just coined a new phrase. I like it. I'm going to use that.
An agile or scrum, event or something that you're trying to accomplish. You got to let them know where you are. And if you're especially coming into a new team, that trust hasn't been built yet, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not just know your audience, it's introduce yourself to your audience as well at the same time.
Right. And let them know where you're coming from. Like the story that comes to mind is I went through and we were going to do this journey mapping exercise, and it was a brand new team. It was a brand new product that we were trying to build.
And they were all embracing Agile as the best thing ever.
It was a big hug fest. Everybody was hugging. We were holding hands.
For sure.
We were singing Kumbaya and the Buy the World a Coke song.
I feel like there might be some sarcasm in that answer.
It was perfect harmony, Peter. It was perfect harmony. No. So this client that I was at, they were just starting on their kind of agile transformation and down that path. So we get into the journey mapping exercise to say, what are we trying to build? What is this product that we're trying to build? And
what's our widget?
Product owner there. We had leadership there from the client. We had the whole development team there. And so I introduced myself. I had already been through with the team what we were trying to accomplish, but some of the leadership came in. And leadership are sometimes the last people to buy in on Agile and change in general. Right? Mm-hmm. So we start in on the journey mapping exercise, and I'm asking people just to write down on Post-it notes, and we were gonna put them up on the board about different pieces of what we think the system is supposed to be, right? So I go through the exercise, I pass out the Post-it notes, I give everybody a pen. I was like, all right, you got 5 minutes. Let's start with the big rocks, right? One of the managers looks at me and he's like, did you just stand up there and write it all down and we'll just say it as we go? It's like, dude, come on. We're trying to do something here. We're trying to get everybody involved because, a lot of times when leadership is there, people shut down and they don't want to put themselves out there.
Nobody's shouting out the answer that they think is maybe right, but maybe wrong.
Right.
They're only going for the sure wins then, right?
Exactly. So I had to take a step back. I had to...
and not punch him in the nose.
I did not. Let me take a step back. Bam. No, I just had to re-explain to everybody, we're starting from absolute zero here. We got nothing. There's not one line of code written, and this is a wholly brand new thing that we're building. So it can be anything we want it to be as long as the product owner says, yes, it should be.
Right.
So let's all just kind of take any preconceptions of what things should be, and let's start from zero. And we were able to get some buy-in then, and people weren't so tentative, I guess, about going down that.
Well, and if you have one manager that's pushing back on not filling out any Post-its and not trying the exercise, then pretty soon the senior developer might feel like, well, if they're too cool, I should be that cool too. So I'm going to cross my arms and sit back here and watch the world explode. And then I'll tell everybody I was right when I said we shouldn't do this, right? So
it's as simple as one person sitting down at stand-up.
Yeah.
Like if you got that one person who's like, I'm just going to sit in my chair.
Yep.
I don't care what anybody... it's
I've been there.
15 minutes. Like, unless you got something that's prohibiting you from doing that, which I know you don't.
I've seen you on the soccer field. I'm pretty sure that you're not.
Yeah. I walked through the Skyway for a half an hour with you the other day on the way into the office.
That is interesting that it only takes one person sitting down at a stand-up to...
Oh, yeah. And I've had that happen, and it was, it was the senior kind of senior developer architect and is like, oh, now I'm screwed. Because there's no coming back from that when someone they respect, that the team respects, kind of disrespects the process.
And I've had that experience where somebody remote admitted that they were sitting down during stand-up. Before that moment, everybody at stand-up in the office was standing up. But as soon as they found out the remote person was sitting down, then they're like, wow, and I don't have to stand, right? Like,
was this a camera on or camera off situation?
This was before the pandemic, so there were no cameras. It was all call in and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just one of those funny things.
They could have just lied. And said, yeah, I'm standing up. When they're really just laying down on a couch.
You could be laying laying out on your couch. We won't know, but just pretend for the sake you've messed it up for everybody. So, okay, we talked about listening. We talked about getting the audience to know you. What about speaking different languages or talking differently to different folks? We brushed on that a little bit, Julia, at the beginning, like, talk to the CEO in one way and to talk to the developer in another way.
Mm-hmm.
Can you push that a little bit farther for me? Like, I know you okay, we're going to limit the facts the CEO knows because reasons, right? There's always a reason.
Time usually, right?
Time. Yeah, that's very true.
Being efficient. Yeah, it goes back to, I think, when I said trying to understand what motivates people, I think helps you develop the language that kind of reaches them. I'm a big proponent in kind of tapering my communication style to better match the person that I'm talking to or working with. And it's not just CEO versus, line level employee or whatever they would be called. It's also, I'm more of a amiable, collaborative type person. There's people I have worked with that were very much drivers, and understanding that those communication differences, I think, is really helpful. So I can sort of understand what a driver is looking for. Like, they want details, they want facts, they want to, have the information and move forward quickly. Whereas someone that's maybe more analytical, they're going to maybe be a little slower absorbing the information.
Sure.
And, you might need to let them sit in silence and process internally. Then you get those other folks that are, process everything externally. So
right.
I think you can usually sense that pretty quickly, what kind of person you're working with. And then, not like you lose yourself or your own style or your own kind of truth or honesty about who you are, but you just taper a little bit to maybe with a driver, deliver the information quickly.
Sure.
And give them time to go off and get started, because that's
and they have to leave and think about it and then come back. Whereas somebody who's more analytical might be like, okay, let me take that in. I'm going to think about it. And then keep on going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
John, how about you? You kind of tailor some language or change the message a little bit depending on who you're delivering it to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we're working with a Scrum team or a project team, you can get down into the nitty gritty, right? And you can do that very quickly because it comes from a base of where a standpoint that everybody's at, and we've been working on this project for 9 months, so everybody knows that on the third page of the web page, the color is blue, and you know that the menu is white and the font is green and all that stuff, right? And we all get into these situations where every detail of everything that's going on,
right?
Because you've lived it for so long. Well, but then, you can talk to those people one way, but then you start talking to upper management, the VPs, the CEOs. They just want to see bullet points, and they want to see things like, what are your dependencies? Because they have to they ride over the top of all of these things, and they need to make sure that they're calling that out, if you haven't already. Call that out to these other teams, right? And they want to see what your risks and your issues are, and and definitely schedule and things like that. It's not just, hey, what are we doing this sprint? It's like, what are we doing in this PI or the program increment or this quarter or next quarter, or what those roadmaps.
When are we going to be done?
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So
timeline and cost.
when can we push the button? That's always the big one, right?
Yep.
I'll mark that with a story. The single greatest piece of savvy communication I've ever seen is I'm working at a large agricultural and logistics company here in Twin Cities. I was working for them, and there were a couple different consulting companies involved, and then there was also a large consulting company involved, as well as then people from smaller companies like and we'd been planning a production cutover in Europe, and this was something that had to be done in 30 hours. Otherwise, chickens would start dying. If we didn't get it done in 30 hours, chickens couldn't be fed automatically, and it's like, well, just get a bucket and start feeding them out of the bucket.
Yeah. But there was no pressure,
I was told we don't do that. Like, that just is not possible. There are no buckets in this facility to feed the chickens. Anyway, so we were nearly done with the cutover. There was one piece that was holding us up, and this we had consultants around the world working on this thing. All time zones were represented, more or less, or like across all times. And we had some people in India that were the experts of the area that was being held up, and the manager from the other large consulting. The guy was a very good communicator. He was upper management relationship manager between the client and a bunch of different areas. Yeah. Very savvy, polished, I would say. And I had never, he was from Indian descent, and I had never heard him have an Indian accent at all. Right. And he had been schooled in the United States and from a younger age. Well, we get on the phone with these developers in India, and he immediately launched into an Indian accent and was even throwing words that I had never heard around, so I only have to assume those were words that are used in India. Sure. And he spoke those developers' language. Right. And he got very quickly, he was able to gain their trust and get to the root of the problem, because these were folks that I had never talked to before. It was, and it was things that needed to happen quickly. But just him launching into the accent so quickly, I think it put them at ease. It let them know that he understood them, and things went fairly smooth from there. We had a few hours left of the cutover to happen, but from there, it was an understanding of what exactly needed to be done, because were they going to open up to me like that?
They were telling you what you wanted to hear, right?
Right. For one, I don't work for the company that they work. So they were going to keep everything close to the vest, because this whole project the cutover was depending on them. So if I had any ammunition to say finger pointing, not that they were not going to give that, right? But this other guy, he was able to get that and kind of just cut through all of it.
He had instant credibility.
Right. The funny thing was, we get off the call, we're just talking in the room, and no accent again. It was very strange. It was like, where'd that accent go, buddy?
Very adaptable.
Yeah.
Sometimes obviously it would be a whole different story if, John, you had put on a false accent that you could never have pulled off in a million years.
You would have got fired.
I think they call that cultural appropriation.
Yeah. But in this case, it was a little bit of a lie, but not really. And he knew how to talk to those folks. He knew what they needed to hear to open up. He knew what they needed in order to kind of have a safe space, right?
Yeah, right. So, and even though he was a senior manager from the same company that they worked for, and they would have been intimidated by that, because I know for a fact they'd never talked to him before, but just by the fact of him putting that face on, and knowing where they're coming from, it put them totally at ease. We cut through any of the BS, and we got down to the root of the problem, and that's all that was really needed.
You didn't have to go through all the ceremonies, and the court jesters didn't have to talk or anything like that. It was just people communicating and getting right through, right?
I don't know if you've ever been involved in many like large, multi-day cutovers, but on those bridge calls, there's not a lot of fun, exciting talking.
Nobody's
silence.
Yeah.
And even if you know somebody's on the line, you might have to ping them a little bit, get on the computer, like, hey, speak up. I know you know this.
Yeah, those are. I remember those days of being on those conference calls that we're just going to keep this line open for 30 hours and people are buzzing in and out and trying to make.
I always used to like at like 4 a.m. just start playing music. And people would be like, what is, or something super off the wall. What is going on?
That's music for the chickens.
Yeah.
You gotta play a little music for the chickens.
That's right.
Right. The meat tastes more succulent. The Kobe beef.
But yeah. And are there any, like, I don't know. I don't really have any tricks like that just sort of make you an insta connection. Do you guys have insta connections, or is it really just a process and you're just going to have to listen and deal with people, right?
I've always found that if you can like kind of do just a little bit of homework, like if somebody like say you're working with somebody in Ireland, or if you're working with somebody, in the Philippines or something, just do a little bit of homework on what the weather is there, or which sports team just won something, or whatever that is.
Knowing what time it is.
You kind of beat them to the punch on that instead of asking them to say, hey, I know it's 5 a.m. there, but it looks like it's going to be a beautiful day. Your weather is this. And it kind of takes people off guard, and it drops their guard a little bit, and they are more apt to open up.
And because you're rightfully so, right? You're caring about enough to go look at the weather. I mean, you didn't have to look at the weather. Yeah.
I don't think there's a silver bullet. Sometimes you get lucky, and you meet someone that you have to, establish quick rapport with, and you just happen to hit it off. But more often than not, it's like, again, just like letting yourself be a little vulnerable, maybe kind of puts them more at ease, and then finding that thing that you can connect on, whether it's the project or the work or something outside of it. But I don't think there's any like trick that every time I have to collaborate with someone new or a new audience, this is what I do. I think the biggest thing, especially in groups and on projects, is making it. I think Peter, you hit on it. Like I think you said, creating a safe space. And that's what I think it is, establishing quickly that everybody has a voice, everyone's going to be heard. And not only can you speak up, you're expected to, because you're part of this team, self-managing team, hopefully. And, they have a responsibility to be a voice on that project. So establishing that it's safe to speak up, not being afraid of having tough conversations. John, what just happened to your background? You just like went to Palm Springs or something.
Right. No, it's that sometimes, right? Just getting people out of the norm.
Oh yeah.
Like if they're always seeing the wooden doors behind your head, Peter.
Yeah.
If you switch your background, you're like, oh, look at this. I'm at the beach today. It's beautiful here. It's stuff
That's
like
fun.
that. Like, just like, don't always
have a steer behind you.
Safe. Like sometimes just put yourself out there, and it gives people a reason like, oh, I can do that too. Like, haha, like we used to all change our backgrounds, like
daily, right?
Time a week, and it just be like that. It just builds that team. I know that there's others. I'm gonna give a little shout out to like Dean Duffing. I know that they like that guy's been a scrum master a long time, and like I hear about the things that he does, and I'm like, God, that's so smart. You know, like they have a song of the day, and each different team member has to like at the beginning of stand up or whatever, they play their song of the day.
Wow.
And it's like, that's genius, right? I mean, it engages people, it gets people talking.
You learn about them.
Yeah, you learn a little bit. Oh, I like this band, you know, whatever, Black Flag. Oh, yeah, hey, I'm a Black Flag fan too. I am not a bit. I just tried to think of something out there.
Something out there. Swedish death metal wasn't your choice.
Right.
If everybody has, you know, you're expected to participate in that way, you start to establish that everybody on this team, you know, carries the same weight, regardless of whether they're a Black Flag fan or not.
Right.
Well, and it brings up
expected to, you know, chime in.
It levels that playing field, makes a safe space because not only do you have to, you know, participate, you're going to want to participate because you have things to, everybody has opinions about how an app or how a project should happen or a piece of things should happen. Getting them to share is amazing.
One of the things I was thinking about this morning was, you know, we're talking about how we gauge the audience and maybe taper our communication. I've had young folks that I've, you know, coached who I've been trying to get them to speak up for months. You know, you have something valuable to contribute. So, you know, when we have these team meetings or even when we meet with leadership, don't be afraid to speak up. And then sometimes they do because they've been encouraged. And sometimes they haven't yet established tapering their communication for the for the audience. So you're glad they spoke up, but they might kind of blurt out something like, there's no way we're finishing this by September, where you could maybe, you know, change the wording a little bit to be a little more diplomatic about the situation.
September is a very optimistic time for us to be finishing this project.
Exactly.
We're building a skateboard here. We can get the skateboard done by September. Then we'll go to the bike, then with the motorcycle, then the car, right? I mean, let's think about MVP.
Yes. Yeah. And that's fun, right? Like, but having them open up and do that blurted out communication, as long as everybody didn't jump on them and tear them apart when that happens, they're probably going to be, they're going to learn, they're going to be more willing to share things and probably share them in the right forum, in the right language and
coaching moment.
Right. But that's, I mean, like, I'm glad you spoke up. It's great for management to hear that. It might not, we might want to not be so direct with our language next time. And you know, all right, what else? I'm trying to like finding the sweet spot of communication. That's one of those that's fun, right? Like we've talked about it so many times in this conversation, you know, just having that insta connect. It's so fun when it happens. Amazing.
Sometimes it's pulling teeth, and I don't care what you do.
More often.
That person's not right.
They might have a really well built out shield, right?
Yeah, and a lot of times that shield goes up because they've been burned.
I spoke up 3 years ago, and nobody lets me forget about it.
Right. Exactly. So, you know, I've worked with an upper manager one time, or a development manager, who, I mean, I couldn't get more than one word responses out of that guy the longest time. And again, it's like once you get that crack, you can find and wiggle your way in a little bit. It helps, but it's frustrating when people will not open up. But there's all kinds of people out there, and they might have their reasons, right?
Sure.
It just is what it is.
And maybe they only respond in one word sentences because, you know, whatever reason, they've been doing it for 20 years and they're not going to change now.
It's working for them. Is that
That's
what you're
right.
saying?
Yeah. Like nobody's fired me for my yes, no answers up to this point. I'm going to keep doing that.
I worked with a team that, you know, we all shared cubes in a row right next to each other, as well as like I could look across the aisle and there was someone sitting there. This is our whole team. these folks still chose to communicate on Slack, even though they're sitting right next to each other.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of crazy and absurd. But, as someone that's trying to help facilitate their work, I had to jump in and get used to that. They don't want me to poke my head over the cube and like a prairie dog and be like, hey, what ticket number was that or whatever. They prefer to have their communication directed through Slack versus a face-to-face thing. So, if that's your audience, I think you have to adjust and be versatile and, meet them where they want to be met. And also push the needle a little, I hope.
I was going to just say that I have worked in the library situations that you're talking about where this is a place where people work, right? Like we're not in a library, we're in an office. And then I've been in the other side of the coin where it's a circus where, Nerf things, this and that are flying over your head. And, you might be able to hear a conversation. You might not be able to hear yourself think because everybody's having loud conversations and getting, and those two environments could be doing the exact same work, right? That's just everybody, but you're right. You kind of push that library a little bit to like, hey, maybe we can just do this with a little quick word or something.
Yeah.
And then, hey, maybe we don't need the circus.
In the pre-Slack days, I mean, that's how old I am, right? But in the pre-Slack days, I worked for a large healthcare employer here in the Twin Cities, probably the largest. But I would go and I'd set up a conference room and to have meetings in, right? And it's like, hey, everybody come it's like 25 steps away. Come to the conference room.
Right.
People would call in from their desks into the meeting. And I was like, well, I got to have a call-in number because people, not working here.
Because there's 3 people, 2 cities over that need to be here, but...
Yeah, there were many people who would just call in from their desks. And it's like, it's a half an hour. Come on, get up, come down here. When I started bringing the candy dish, that's when people started coming to the meeting.
Yeah. Or donuts.
Candy's a big motivator.
Yeah. I'm not above bribing people to participate.
Well, and you find out what kind of candy they like, right?
Yeah.
Why is nobody eating the M&Ms? Oh, well, they hate M&Ms. They're Skittles people for whatever reason. Why you'd be a Skittles person, I don't know, but some people are.
Taste the rainbow.
Right.
I don't know. I covered a lot. So we talked about sort of new employees versus long-term employees. And there are times where some long-term employees want to own the whole show. And there are other times where they want to not be interrupted from their whatever they do all day long, right? You find easy ways to crack those folks, get them on board? Or is it just kind of like we've been talking about, the same old process, get to know them, get to figure it out?
And I've used the tactic with people who are very knowledgeable about what we're working with, whatever that is.
Yep.
And they kind of want to hold on to it. And it's,
right.
It's their baby. They don't want to let, whether that's they just don't have a lot of words or they are thinking that's job security.
Right.
Or whatever that is, right? There's many reasons why people do that.
The last guy that shared what he was doing out of the building.
Yeah. He gave up all of his documentation and then they canned him, right?
Right.
I mean, I've always used the tactic of people will be more, I'll say, receptive to you if you are giving more information to them. And it's a give and take, right? And if all you want to do is hold on to everything and hold it all very close to the vest, nobody's going to offer you anything.
Right.
Let's open up. Let's make this better for everyone. And this way we can take some of that workload off of you, because maybe you're not doing exactly what you want to do. Maybe, there's some busy work that we could get a very junior developer, which it's not busy work to them. It's new and exciting. And
right.
pumped about it. But just using that, like, you kind of have a responsibility here also, because, when you get hit by the bus,
right,
what's going to happen?
Mm.
Right. It's going to take over. They're just going to be mad at, they're going to put up posters and be mad at you for 3 years while they try to learn everything that you did for.
Put your picture on the
time.
airport.
Yeah, that's right. And I've met some individuals that are, that you do eventually try to get, like you said, share and share alike, right? Like that's probably a great way to open up. Hey, or another way from a developer standpoint is, hey, I'm having trouble with this thing. Can you help me with this thing? Right? Like, and then maybe you'll ask me later on, well, I've been kind of stuck on this one problem, and have you seen this? Oh yeah, I have.
Right.
So get that two-way street going. John, final thoughts.
Communication and being able to tailor that it's kind of paramount to what we're trying to, especially in roles that Julia and I have. It's very, if we weren't able to communicate, we would be in a tough spot, right? I mean, a developer can look at Jira and find out what they need to do and put the minimum communication in, but still get their job done. Right. Our job is mostly, we wouldn't be doing it if we weren't good at it. And but it behooves everyone to become better at. And whether your style is going through Slack or meeting in person or sketching things out on a napkin at happy hour or whatever that is, you should try to find out how you do that best.
And embrace it.
Try to embrace it. Exactly.
Julia, parting thoughts from you?
Yeah, I like what John's saying. I think it can be sometimes, especially in situations where that might be tense or maybe relationships aren't as strong. You can have this tendency to think, well, I'm not going to meet this person in the middle. I'm going to stick to who I am and stick to my guns and, screw them. They need to come to the middle too. But I think it's important to kind of keep the end goal in mind. And what are you trying to accomplish? You really care about the success of your team or the project you're working on or the organization you're working for. It's going to take some give and take. And especially like in a leadership position, you need to be willing to, not sell yourself out, obviously, but, come to the middle a bit, figure out, what is it that's motivating these people you're working with? Find a common ground and just focus on the win. Whatever it is, what the end goal is, that's what everyone should be driving for, no matter what style they use to get there.
That's awesome. I'm gonna close with my quick take, and I'm gonna say that knowing your audience is also about your audience knowing you. So put yourself out there, open up a little bit. Make a safe space for everyone, and you'll get that sharing, and soon you might be skating through the parking lots or what have you, or talking across the world about chickens. So it's a wonderful thing. So I want to thank both of you for being my guest today. This is wonderful, and thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for the chat.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.